Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all very much indeed for joining me, and welcome to my second GCA webinar. I'm going to focus today on latest developments, in particular some highlights from the 2021 GCA survey. A few housekeeping points before we get going. We're recording this webinar and it'll be available online on the GCA website and on the GCA YouTube site shortly. Microphones will be turned off during the session, but there will be opportunities to ask questions using the chat function. I trust that everything will proceed smoothly this afternoon, but please do bear with us if we have any technical problems. The main focus of the webinar today is to share the results of the GCA 2021 survey, including how suppliers have viewed retailer compliance with the code, who has performed the best in 2021, what are the major code issues being reported and how they stack up, and what are the issues of concerns for suppliers in the coming months. I'll talk about what I'm doing with the survey, including how I'm using it to drive further improvements in retailer behaviour, and the further work that YouGov is currently doing to explore some issues in greater detail. In addition, I want to talk about working with the code compliance officers, and there'll be a chance to ask some questions at the end. I believe that the survey for 2021 has been very successful. But before sharing the responses in detail, I want to take a moment to thank all those who participated in the survey and everyone who helped to publicise it. This was a truly tremendous response. In 2020, the GCA survey attracted a record number of replies, but respondents surpassed that by 60% in 2021. The total number of replies was 2,598, of which 2,398 were direct suppliers, 159 were indirect suppliers, and 42 trade associations. And there was also a big increase in the number of responses from suppliers based outside the UK. I'm really grateful to the retailers who supported the survey by sending information about it to their suppliers and encouraging them to take part. As a result, I have an extremely comprehensive view of the sector, with direct suppliers giving me their frank views on the designated retailer's performance and the issues that most concern them. The results from the 2021 GCA survey show that the number of suppliers reporting that they had experienced code-related issues at any stage in the past year is at a new low, down to 29% from 36% in 2020. This is particularly encouraging given the challenges of the past year and the large rise in the number of responses to the survey. It demonstrates just how far the sector has come since 2014, when 8 out of 10 suppliers reported experiencing issues in the very first GCA survey. I must stress that this is a snapshot in time and reflects the sector as it was in January and February when YouGov carried out the survey. I'm very aware of the current changes and challenges facing the sector that will undoubtedly have an impact on designated retailers and their direct suppliers. As we have just seen in the last few weeks, with the shortage of HGV drivers and increases in delivery charges by some retailers, concerns change rapidly. So as the sector changes, so will my focus. I'm closely following how the designated retailers operate in the new normal as the sector adapts to the post-COVID-19 environment and to Brexit. Constructive relationships between suppliers and retailers are crucial, but so is the relationship that I have with both sides. Each year, suppliers have given an overall assessment of how they believe each retailer complies with the code. This provides a clear measure for the GCA to benchmark progress. Every year since 2014, when the percentage range for mostly or consistently complying with the code was between 58 and 90, the survey has shown marked improvement. In 2021, suppliers see more retailers performing at high levels. The left-hand image on this slide shows the 2021 overall compliance ranking of retailers by suppliers. It really is now extremely tight at the top, with more than half the retailers scoring 95% or more, compared with just one in 2020. Iceland was the sole performer below 90%, but on the positive side, they rose 5% in the year to 86%. I believe that it's testimony to the code's positive influence that we've seen such results in a year of massive challenge for the sector. For the first time since the annual surveys were conducted, there's a new retailer at the top of the table. So many congratulations to Sainsbury's, which scored an all-time high of 98%, but close behind were both the Co-op and Aldi on 97%. The image on the right-hand side of this slide shows that Aldi, which has been the top-ranked retailer for the past 7 years, continued to rank highest when suppliers were asked whether the retailers conducted trading relationships fairly, in good faith, and without duress. Looking more closely at retailer practice, suppliers reported more had improved overall in the year. 8 retailers received net positive improvement scores. That is, those suppliers saying the company's behaviour had improved, minus those saying it had got worse. This compares to 6 net improvers in 2020. Only Asda, Iceland and Ocado received net negative improvement scores. However, there was a greater range of net improvement scores, with the most improved, the Co-op, scoring plus 20%, and the least improved, Ocado, scoring minus 17%, compared to a range of plus 21% and minus 8% in the previous year. In 2021, in all cases bar one, the percentage of suppliers reporting they've experienced code-related issues fell. The remaining issue, payments for better positioning, rose very slightly, as shown in the left-hand image on this slide. When suppliers were asked to report on issues covered in previous surveys, the percentage reporting that they had experienced the issue had reduced or stayed the same in all cases except one, and that was requests for lump sum payments relating to better positioning in retailers' virtual stores and not in relation to promotions, which rose by 1%. The right-hand image shows that the 2 top issues in code language concerning suppliers continue to be forecasting and delays in payment, although this year the percentage reporting them as an issue has fallen slightly from 2020. The third issue is the obligation to contribute to marketing costs. This year, for the first time, I asked about 2 other issues. Firstly, whether suppliers had experienced Brexit-related retrospective or unilateral changes to supply agreements, which was reported by 8% of suppliers, placing it joint 6. And secondly, whether they'd experienced difficulty in securing EPOS or warehouse data to validate timely payment from a retailer, which was reported by 6%, placing it joint 11th. I'm very pleased that the survey showed an increase in confidence to report issues to the GCA, with a 12% rise in those ready to do so from 2020, as well as high awareness amongst suppliers that the GCA operates confidentially, a very gratifying 78%. Of those saying that they would not raise an issue with the GCA, the 2 main reasons were that they believed that the retailer will find out and there would be consequences for their business, or they thought that they could deal with the matter themselves. I'm pleased with this increased confidence because, as I've said before, it's very much been a focus of mine from the start to increase suppliers' trust that they can raise issues with me and the retailer's code compliance officers in total confidence that their information will be treated confidentially. My very strong message to suppliers is that I'm here to support you, that I have an open door policy, and vitally important that you can trust me to preserve confidentiality at all times. However, nothing can replace the constructive, collaborative relationship that ought to exist between the supplier and the buyer. Almost all issues can be resolved through open dialogue between them. My confidential platform, tellthegca.co.uk, has now been operating successfully since February. It's available in a range of languages to support overseas suppliers. And just a reminder, it's hosted by an independent third party for suppliers to report behaviour by a designated retailer that they believe to be in breach of the code. Suppliers can provide information anonymously and can also choose to continue to correspond with me through a secure postbox that protects their identity. As the lockdown eases, I intend to get out and about more, and I will continue to encourage suppliers to report code-related concerns to me. In this year's GCA survey, suppliers were asked to comment on what they thought would be the main issues in the next 6 to 12 months. The overwhelming response to this question was Brexit. Of the 958 suppliers who provided a comment, 400 mentioned Brexit. The message that I'm hearing is that Brexit is likely to be inflationary in the medium term, though some promotional activity may currently see some consumer price deflation. And so suppliers should be ready to engage at pace and be prepared for different challenges. Some retailers have said that they will not entertain any cost increases, whether these are caused by the new import-export paperwork, the hurdles to get product into Northern Ireland, or the large increases in container costs. Other retailers are more sympathetic, especially to smaller suppliers. Clearly, the supply agreement and the supplier-retailer relationship are the first port of call as these changes come to light and have to be dealt with. And I really encourage suppliers to look ahead to the next round of negotiations and discussions with retailers to ensure that they capture any unexpected costs that slip through the net and the current supply agreement as they work with the buyers. Other strongly identified issues were COVID-19, which was mentioned by 255 respondents, and price, which was mentioned by 143 respondents, followed by range reviews, forecasting, and delisting. I'm aware that some retailers are conducting range reviews and that their delisting policies may be causing some concern. More about that shortly. Each retailer has now received company-specific analysis of the results of the survey broken down by code issue to help them identify and understand areas for further improvement. I've discussed the headline findings with each of the retailers, and I'll be engaging with them as we move forward to understand their plans on how they will address their individual feedback. YouGov is currently carrying out a series of deep dive interviews with a range of suppliers representing different areas of the grocery sector and different sizes to explore a number of issues, including their experience of range reviews in much greater detail. I plan to hold a virtual conference in September, and I'll release the results of this second stage of the survey at the conference. I continue to work closely and collaboratively with the code compliance officers, and I know that they are committed to ensuring that their individual retailer is code compliant and that behaviour and relationships continue to improve. A priority for me has been to drive forward a whole house approach to code compliance, looking at the tone from the top of the retailers and further exploring training, including the link with remuneration and assurance. An important point of regular discussion with the code compliance officers has been how they can do more to promote their role to their supplier bases to ensure that it's clear that they sit outside the buying teams and are often the best and quickest place to resolve any issues which cannot be resolved through the constructive relationship with the buyer. And I'll be working with the co-compliance officers to promote material that does just that. I do urge suppliers to take issues to the co-compliance officers if they can't be dealt with by the buyer. The co-compliance officers are uniquely placed to resolve code-related issues swiftly, and the formal confidentiality commitment that they've all given should give suppliers confidence that their identities will not be revealed internally within the retailer if that is what they wish. Of course, there may be a limit to what a CCO can resolve if a supplier does not permit the CCO to disclose details within the retailer concerned. However, each issue will have its own unique circumstances, and the confidentiality commitment should enable a dialogue to take place, which allows the supplier to decide when or if to permit details to be disclosed. I hope that this gives you, suppliers, confidence to contact the CCO if you have any unresolved code issue. A particular area I want to better understand is retrospective audit reviews. I've asked all the retailers about the types of audits they conduct on suppliers and the processes for resolving issues that arise during the audit and for dealing with counterclaims. Retrospective audits, especially those related to promotional activity, are exercising some suppliers I talk to because of an apparent lack of data or cherry picking of data, the time it takes to settle matters, and in some cases, attempts to link settlement of issues to current and future trading. Smaller suppliers can be disproportionately affected by such audits, which really concerns me. And I hope to be in a position to update you on these audits shortly. In the meantime, I've clarified with each retailer how suppliers can benefit from the GCA voluntary commitment on forensic auditing. To remind you that with the addition of Sainsbury's from March 2022, all 13 retailers are now signed up to this commitment, which limits the time that each party can reopen to the current year and the previous 2 financial years. As retailers are generally reviewing their ranges and products as the effects of COVID-19 subside and the changes seen in shopper behaviour reveal a potentially different future landscape, I'm receiving lots of queries around the delisting process. I've asked the retailers about their delisting policies, and I've highlighted issues in a very general way that have been raised with me while seeking to ensure that the buyers at the retailers actively engage in dialogue around their delisting decisions, so that suppliers really understand the commercial reasons that they're being given for decisions. I've also been keen to ensure that the designated retailers properly govern delisting decisions to eliminate, for example, the use of 12 weeks as a fixed delist notice period. I've recently published my first annual report and accounts. To read more detail about what has been achieved in the past year, go to www.gov.uk/GCA. This infographic provides information about the GCA and last year's highlights. So I'm going to turn now to some questions that I have received. The first question asks about my top 3 priorities. I suppose that I could summarize these as awareness, confidentiality, and embedding code compliance in retailers' businesses. It's really important to me to raise awareness among suppliers about how the code can help their businesses. Now that restrictions are being lifted in the UK, I'm very keen to meet as many suppliers as possible on a face-to-face basis so that I can hear about their concerns. Meantime, the Code Confident Pack is available on the GCA website, and I'm having virtual meetings with suppliers. Another priority has been to create an environment in which suppliers feel totally confident to raise issues with me or the code compliance officers, secure in the knowledge that their approach will be treated confidentially. Soon after I was appointed, I raised this issue with the CCOs, and as I said a little bit earlier, all of the CCOs have confirmed their previous practice, which was to keep confidential any matter related to the code. But this is now in writing and posted on my website, and it's up to the supplier and the supplier alone to judge whether to allow the code compliance officer to share further details of their discussion within the business. In the recent GCA survey, as I just said, 78% of respondents confirmed that they knew that I operated confidentially. And I've also extended the ways in which suppliers can contact me on a confidential basis by using the tellthegca.co.uk website, which allows confidential reports to be made to me on a 24/7, 365-day-a-year basis, which will enable overseas suppliers to reach out to me on their own time zones. And finally, code compliance needs to be embedded in everything that the designated retailers do. I'm driving forward the whole house approach to compliance and expanding on previous discussions, looking very carefully at the tone from the very top of the retailers and further exploring links between training, remuneration and assurance. And I suppose that there is a fourth priority, in that the sector is moving at such a rapid pace, so my priorities will change as the sector changes. Another question I've been asked is whether retailers need to provide an appropriate period of notice of any increases that they apply to their charges. I think that the question has probably been prompted by recent reports that some retailers have given suppliers notice of an increase in distribution charges. Charges for supply chain matters are different to changes in procedures where the code requires reasonable notice to be given or appropriate compensation if notice is not given. For changes to charges, the code prohibits the retrospective variation of supply agreements unless the change is clearly flagged in the supply agreement, prompted by a change of circumstances outside the retailer's control, and sets out how the changes in the terms of supply will be calculated. In such a case, there must also be reasonable notice. My understanding of the increases that I have seen reported is that the changes are not retrospective but prospective, with notice periods of between 2 and 12 weeks before the increases come into effect, which allows, I guess, in at least some cases, suppliers to seek to find another way to deliver product. As with the imposition of all changes and charges by designated retailers, I expect these to be clearly set out in the supply agreement and for the procedure for notifying suppliers of any changes to be equally clearly set out. I would therefore recommend that suppliers check their individual supply agreements to ensure that the retailer is complying with that supply agreement. Another question that I've received concerns the designation of other retailers. So in particular, it asks when retailers such as Boots, Superdrug and Holland & Barrett are going to be added to the list. And a comment is made that it seems strange that the likes of Home Bargains and B&M are now included and that Boots and so on are not. So designation of additional retailers is a matter for the Competition and Markets Authority and not for the GCA. The Competition and Markets Authority considers every year whether additional retailers should be designated, and will look to see whether retailers reach the threshold criteria for designation, which is UK annual turnover of £1 billion in the retail supply of groceries. Groceries excludes pharmaceuticals, perfumes, cosmetics and electrical appliances, so you can see that a significant portion of some of these retailers' revenues are not derived from groceries. I've been asked an interesting question about the garment adjudicator and can I provide an update on the progress of the garment adjudicator. I'm aware of the letter which the Right Honourable Philip Dunn, the chairman of the Environmental Audit Committee, wrote on the 10th of March to the Secretary of State for BEIS, suggesting that the government consider the introduction of a garment trade adjudicator modelled on the GCA. That suggestion is clearly a matter for the government to respond to, but I am of course happy to discuss with both ministers and BEIS how the GCA operates in practice in order to help with their consideration of the issue. Finally, I've been asked about the engagement of overseas suppliers and how this is changing over time. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, we've seen a huge increase in the number of respondents to the 2021 GCA survey, a little under 2,600, so up 60% on 2020, which itself was a year in which there was a record number of respondents. The number of direct suppliers increased in 2021 to around 2,400, and there was a really pleasing increase in the number of overseas suppliers who participated. The retailers have greatly helped by advertising the survey amongst their supplier bases, both at home and overseas, and asking them to complete my survey. I also increased the amount of advertising that we commissioned whilst the survey was open. And as I mentioned earlier, we also have the Tell the GCA .co.uk website available 24/7 and 365 days a year, which has no geographic restrictions and enables overseas-based suppliers to contact me if they feel that they cannot contact me directly. And several of the participants on today's webinar are dialing in from overseas, and there are also a number of UK participants on the webinar who represent their overseas-based parent companies. I'm really very encouraged by the increasing visibility that overseas-based suppliers have of the GCA and our work. I think that we're nearing the end of our time today. I'm very happy to answer any other questions outside the webinar that I didn't manage to address in the time slot available today. I want to thank you all very much indeed for your time. As I mentioned earlier, I'm keen to meet suppliers and to hear their concerns on code matters. I hope to publish details of public events that I'm attending as we move forward. Please do let me or my team know of any code related issues. The GCA contact details are shown here. And please keep up to date with the GCA website, which contains useful information including case studies, interpretive guidance and best practice statements. Thank you and a very good afternoon.